Welcome to Microcollege, a podcast exploring innovative, place-based, and humanly scaled responses to the crises in higher education, meaning, and discourse in our time. Everyone knows that colleges and universities are at a breaking point, but what can be done? I'm Jacob Hunt, the director of Thoreau College, a microcollege in Viroqua, Wisconsin. Join us each week as we tackle this question head-on. Welcome to Microcollege. Today on the podcast, we are honored to have Steve Lawless. Locals in the Viroqua area will know Steve. He is the magician behind the Mary Green Marvel, the proprietor of Sittin Pretty Farms. He has been a lifelong educator, teacher at many different levels, different formats and settings. This summer, he's been a partner with Thoreau College and the Driftless Folk School and many other local organizations through the pizza nights he's staged at Sittin Pretty Farm outside of Viroqua. And today we're here to talk to him about the Mary Green Marvel and really the approach of adventure education and service education and travel on a bus. The Mary Green Marvel is a 40-foot sleeper coach adventure bus, which Steve describes as a rolling community of adventure and service. Takes trips all over the country, college students, younger people, and yeah, it's a marvelous project. Thank you for joining us today, Steve.
Good to be here, Jacob.
Steve, here on the podcast, we like to begin by asking people to reflect a bit on their own young adulthood. So maybe could you tell us where you were around 20 years old? What were you doing? Who were you with? And what stands out about that period in your life?
Oh, my, that's a stretch. 20 years old, I was just emerging from the tall corn country of central Iowa. I grew up on a farm in central Iowa. It was a family farm that had been in the family for over 150 years. And I always joke that I'm at 6'7", I was tall enough to get above the corn and find my way out. At 20 years old, I was probably in between semesters in college, and I was still going back home for summers and working in the detasseling crews. We used to detassel seed corn.
One of the great rites of passage of the American Midwest.
Yes.
For those that don't know, can you describe what detasseling is?
Yeah, so seed corn has evolved over the years, and it became a hybrid. So in the genetics of things, certain rows of corn, the female rows, had to be detasseled in order for the pollination, the crossing, to go right. So that was a job for many young people in the rural communities of Iowa to work for the seed corn companies that had certain plots of seed corn.
So this means going out into those endless fields there and through the corn. I mean, I remember doing some work myself, not detasseling exactly, but you get cut up. It's really hot and sweaty. And there's a real sense of completion because you're moving down the row from one end to the other.
Yes, yeah, and as you say, it was quite a rite of passage for young people. I remember, people that were 13 and 14 years old, going out, and that was their first job, and we'd get up before dawn, and I used to drive the bus even back then to take the crews out to do the detasseling, and lots of stories. My brother met his wife in the cornfields, cornfield romance. There was a lot of that. The pollen path, we called it. There was a funny memory was this young fellow, I think he lied about his age to get his first job. This little fellow, we called him Twink. He was probably 4'10", and he was the youngest of our crew and the smallest. And I remember we would wait at the end of the rows for everybody to come out, and then we'd make sure everybody was out before we started our next row. And Twink didn't come out. We were wanting to work at Twink B, and eventually we were concerned enough that I went down the rows and to try to find where he was. And he was up to his waist in mud.
Oh, no.
And he couldn't pull himself out as one of those suction. His boots were down in the mud, so wow. I had to wrestle Twink out of the mud and get him back to the end of the rows again. But we all loved Twink. He had such spunk and desire to work, and of course, many of us learned to work from those for those rough mornings in the cornfields.
Yeah. So where'd you go from there?
So that was between college semesters. I was over at Marquette University in Milwaukee. And I think in some ways that was a Jesuit education and certainly gave me the rigors of academics and balanced with a sense of social justice. So there were seeds of that. I remember getting involved with the Catholic Worker House in Milwaukee and working with kids from North Division High School, doing tutoring, and so it was you know, a lot of book work, but also a chance to get out into the community, and that's really where I felt my education was coming alive, was those interactions out into the community, and I realized that maybe it's more than just about books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so and the Jesuits had a big impact on you, right? You were in the seminary for a while?
Yeah, so after I graduated from college, then I went into what they call their novitiate, and that was a time to kind of explore that as a vocation. I decided not to go ahead with, you know, following that as a life calling, but it was an amazing time, really, a novitiate, and again, it was kind of a fundamental understanding of how service and hands-on learning can have a very powerful impact on a young person. I remember in those 2 years that I was in it, I was a hospital orderly in a cancer ward. I worked in a shelter, a soup kitchen. I worked in a camp for children with cancer. I worked on a farm that Hmong Lao refugees were starting to grow their own produce. And I think one of the things that'll always be with me is a 30-day silent retreat, which, you know, it was really difficult. You know, there's a lot of squirming around and wondering, why am I doing this, trying to be silent for 30 days. But, you know, eventually settled into it, and it was very profound and still kind of a reference point in my life.
Yeah, I think that the religious vocations, right, have you know, in at least traditional religious orders, have suffered a lot. They've really struggled for members in recent times. But I do see in my own work with young people, are still having that question of, what do I do with my life? Right? How can I integrate, you know, spiritual or cultural or moral values along with practical path to living? I'm wondering if that, you know, how you can reflect on that from your own experience and what you see going on with youth today.
Yeah, so that really kind of, you know, lit my fire in terms of how do you integrate the community more into the classroom. I felt like from early on I wanted to be a teacher. And so those early experiences that I had myself became kind of the basis of realizing that how can you extend the walls of the classroom, and how can you access the community in a way where you find these, you know, natural teachers that are, you know, doing their thing, community leaders of sorts, that can, you know, broaden the experience for the student. So really, wherever I've taught, it felt like I was always trying to go out into the community and get to know it well enough, establish a trust to make that conduit from the classroom out into the community.
Yeah, so you've been a classroom teacher, you've been a Waldorf teacher, you know, right through the grades, which is a great adventure on its own through the changes of the years. But I think with the Mary Green Marvel, you've really gone ahead and really taken school out of the classroom in a dramatic way. Can you give us a description of the Mary Green Marvel, and just first of all describe the bus herself?
Sure. Yeah. I mean that. The idea of how do you get you know, students out, you know, we walked all over town, you know, as a classroom, and then we began to say, well, how can we really be mobile? So that was when I finished up the Waldorf experience here, teaching at Pleasant Ridge. Then it became you know, kind of a passion of mine to figure out how can I create this rolling classroom. And there was some examples of it before, you know, I'd heard about the Audubon expedition bus and how that evolved into, I think it was called the Educational Expedition Bus that Larkspur out in Maine did with Microcollege. And then I learned about the Green Tortoise out in San Francisco and what they were doing as kind of a rolling hostel, taking young people out into the national parks, up into Alaska, down into Mexico, Central America, with these buses that they converted to be sleeper coaches. So everything was really contained in the bus, and so that was the spark that got me out to San Francisco, and then I worked for the Green Tortoise for 3 summers to kind of to get my experience and how can I do this, learn from them. So that was amazing, really. I felt like I was an usher for these people of all ages, really, to get on this bus and to take them into a place like Yosemite Park. I'd read about John Muir and, but it was just on paper. But rolling that bus out of San Francisco in the evening and then getting to this place where we would park the bus for a couple hours of sleep. And then it was timed so that we would roll the bus down into Yosemite Valley as the sun was rising.
Oh, wow.
Wake people up to this magic of, the sunlight dancing on the granite face, and then have breakfast along the Merced River. And there was just this, what I would guess is what John Muir experienced, this joy of being out there and to be so immersed in this beautiful natural cathedral. And to, as an usher, to welcome people into it and to watch people just be amazed.
Yeah, I think or Henry David Thoreau, our namesake here, was part of a tradition that it's really flourished through John Muir and many other people down to the present of really celebrating the North American natural landscape, really as a spiritual experience, right? That's pretty different from a lot of what is in the European cultural traditions, and it's as a person as an educator working out of a bus, you have the way to curate that in a really powerful way. It seems like.
Yeah, I've always kind of taken to the phrase, a guide on the side rather than a sage on the stage, and how do I facilitate these experiences so that it really activates, it creates that spark in people where they begin to understand themselves through these experiences out. Muir himself talked about when he would go out for a walk, it was walking the landscape into him. It was that sense of people catching the fire of these experiences and their passion being lit. Yeah. I always understood experiential education is much more than just hands-on learning. It's that sense of creating an experience where something is lit inside of them, something that they begin to discover that the learning is within them, and it's evoked or instigated by what's outside of them.
Yeah, a word that comes up a lot in your materials is the word adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder when you use that word, what do you mean, and how does that relate to the project of service?
Well, I think there's a little quote or phrase that says, a venture is, something that's planned and you go out and do it, and an adventure is something that happens that maybe you didn't plan on. Challenge arise, problems arise, or, what you didn't plan on often, creates that sense of adventure that, makes the trip much more interesting, much more memorable.
Right. Travel is especially good for that, right? That you encounter things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. You never know when the bus is going to break down, and who we might meet to keep us rolling down the road.
So the bus has a capacity of 18. Is that right? Or
actually, it's 36.
Oh wow.
Yeah, we call it the sardine can bus. All the seats have been taken out. The interior has been converted so that everything can become a bed at night. So in some sense, it's kind of the tiny house movement before that became a thing. Every square inch is utilized.
So you've got bathrooms, kitchens.
Yeah, the bus toilet is still in place. So the Greyhound bus toilet, kind of your typical bus, back of the bus deal. And then the luggage racks, the parcel racks, are bunk beds. So we always say when people crawl up there, you get a feeling of what it's like to be in a submarine. And then there's platforms that fold down in the back and in the front that become these big beds that the kids affectionately call them the cuddle puddles. And then in the middle there's dinette tables, and those convert into also bunk beds at night. So yeah, if you can believe it, 36 people can get fitted into all that.
Microcollege is recorded in the broadcast studios of WDRT Viroqua 91.9 FM Driftless Community Radio on Main Street in Viroqua, Wisconsin. Thanks to Jim and all the folks at WDRT for the support of Thoreau College and the Microcollege podcast.
Well, great. So what are some of the places? What are some of the places you go with the bus and things that you do?
So the bus can be chartered. I've worked with groups before where they've had an idea of maybe where they want to go, and then we design the trip together. We go, we've gone to the Blue Ridge Mountains. We've gone out west to Moab. We've gone to the Badlands, out to Pine Ridge Reservation. And then kind of the annual trek for me is the Follow the Birds migration down the flyway to New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And for the past 4 or 5 years, I've had it set up down there where I meet college groups, usually on their holiday or spring break. And then we do a week of service and kind of a cultural immersion down in southern Louisiana. So our service ranges from doing home rebuilds, to areas that are affected by storms or disadvantaged populations, doing home rebuilds like through Habitat Through Humanity. And then most of our work is focused on environmental injustice. And so we take up a lot of the work of wetland restoration. So we partner with other nonprofits down there that are more on the ground and maybe have the trees, the cypress trees to plant, or have, the urban agriculture is another aspect that we connect to. How do people, get a sense of growing their own food and understanding more about the imbalances as far as, healthy food distribution, especially in the inner city.
So, as you mentioned, cultural immersion is a part of this. I mean, that New Orleans area, southern Louisiana, is really distinctive regional culture. Lots of admixtures from different parts of the Caribbean and beyond, and pretty different from places maybe that most American students are coming from. Right? What sort of things do you do to introduce them to that regional culture?
Yeah, that's an exciting thing. Again, I just feel like the usher where I found these amazing people, that represent, that kind of gumbo pot, if you will, of various cultures and traditions of southern Louisiana. So, for example, we often greet student groups on Sunday, and then we go to a place called Congo Square, which is a national park memorial, and it's the place where slaves, a certain house servant slave in New Orleans was sometimes granted what you might think of as free time on a Sunday afternoon, where they would go on their own to this place called Congo Square. And they'd often meet up with the local Indian tribes, and they would have this kind of exchange of goods and merriment. And the slaves were allowed to practice their old African rhythms, which was unheard of really in many slavery experiences, on plantations and whatnot. So they were allowed to bring their drums in, and they would drum on Sunday afternoons, and it was under these beautiful live oak trees. And this dancing, in a sense, is what led to really the birthplace of American music. So if you think of it as a tree that grew out of Congo Square, branches including jazz and blues and gospel and on down the line into rap and hip hop and rock and roll and country music, as it even has its roots in the blues. So much of American music really comes from that plot, and it's a sacred place. And the cultural preservers of New Orleans gather there still on Sunday afternoons at 2:00 and do these drumming circles. So it's a thrill to bring students there, and I know the folks love to have them come. And so the leaders of those drum circles, share with the students their understanding of that place and the importance of it in the culture of New Orleans and really the whole country. And so then the students get worked into drumming on the drums and to get up and dance. And so I can't think of a better welcome to that part of the country than to have that experience to start.
That's amazing. Are there ever any challenges or hiccups or bringing people into a new culture or to cross cultural boundaries, especially when you're as you're doing some service work, situations of poverty, things like that? Is that ever an issue, or how do you prepare people for that, for interacting with people of a different culture and different kind of social class?
Yeah, I think most of the students understand that they're there to serve, and so it's kind of a part of the learning to understand what is it to be of service. And for a long time, I think service was equated with charity. You go and you are the haves and you give to the have-nots, and there might not be much interaction. There might not be much listening of the server to those that they're serving. It's more of I've done my act of charity for the year. But what we try to encourage is really the deeper learning that goes with service, and to understand that the level of our compassion really isn't measured by what we do for the people that may be on the margins. It's our capacity to open our hearts enough that we can develop a relationship, to be in kinship with those people, and to understand that none of us are free until we're all free. And so that's the basis of really kind of going from that place of charity to a place of listening, to hearing their stories, to understanding on a deeper level really what they're going through and what they have gone through, and really to understand, why there are these inequalities and these social justice issues.
Yeah, it seems like an important part of what you do is not, there's planting trees, there's other sorts of physical work, but there's also time built in to listen to people's stories, to meet to people who can, talk about their lives, about whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. And that's so much an important part of it, and so from Congo Square, we go out and we do a cooking class with, a local fellow in the neighborhood that teaches us how to make up jambalaya. And, and in the cooking, there's this recipe that they follow from heart, but with that recipe, like any good, kitchen work, there's these stories that come up. And so, that you feel, what it is to make something by understanding these stories, and, you taste it in the end.
Yeah.
And then there's the joy of making up this big batch of jambalaya, for example, and then opening the door to anybody that's passing by, which is kind of a wonderful tradition that goes with New Orleans too, where strangers are meeting friends, and people that are walking down the streets are invited into your house to experience the joy of a stranger becoming friend, but just sitting down and, breaking jambalaya together, if you will.
Yeah, really engaging all of the senses there.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, it's just such a spontaneous thing because, it's like we make this jambalaya, but then we walk down the street a couple houses and we meet Daryl Montana, for example, who's one of the famous Mardi Gras Indians, and he invites us into his house and he explains to us the family tradition he has of making Mardi Gras Indian costumes and masking, and how, that's an important part of the identity of that culture too, is to have that ability to transport themselves into Indians, this other character, which kind of helps, I think, free them of their own, oppression by being something else, and this dancing tradition and the beauty and glamour of these costumes. And, they talk about this competition they have with other Indian tribes in the city on Mardi Gras morning and killing them dead with needle and thread. They talk about these costumes are worked on by their families for, I think they talk about thousands of hours that go into the beading and the feather work. And it's an amazing sense of color and really that irrepressible joy that they have to not be oppressed, to rise above that and to find that place of celebration and dance. Yeah.
So who are the students who sign up to do these, and what's your sense of what they're seeking?
Yeah, that can vary. I work a lot with, for example, Ohio State University, and their students, that come down are often really unsure what they're getting into. They might have signed up for something they really don't understand, or maybe they thought of New Orleans as being a great place to go party, and so they show up with different levels of expectation or understanding what they're really getting into. I would characterize most of the students that come as being very much on the academic track of a Big Ten university, and they're looking to build up their resume and show that they are doing some service work. But that I find like most of the time that peels away quickly, and it might be their first experience in an inner city doing service work. It might be their first experience being surrounded by African American people, but there's a trust, I think, that they come to realize that, wow, this is a place where I've never been so moved. They hear stories and they have these interactions with these amazing people, and they learn about community leadership and what it is to be an active citizen, and to listen to these stories, as we said before, to really kind of begin to understand, where these people are coming from and why we have these issues that are, around social injustice and inequality.
I think another term along with adventure that comes up on your website and other materials is the concept of the edge of your comfort zone, right? Learning starts at the edge of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. Say more about that. Why is that important to push that boundary of your comfort zone?
Yeah, I think that's where, that spark that I spoke of earlier ignites, that sense of this is where learning really begins. And again, a lot of these students are coming from, the grind of book work and passing exams and, getting good enough grades to go off to their graduate school ambitions or whatever. And this is a whole different kind of learning for them. And it's just a sense of, wow, they go away from these weeks and they have a different understanding of who they are, as well as, the world they live in. And it's beautiful to see, and many relationships that have sprung from that, where I keep in touch with these students, and a lot of times they recognize that as a real turning point in their life, as far as how they approach education and how they understand that education is really can be self-driven and self-motivated by how you put these different pieces of learning together in your life.
Yeah, this has emerged as an important theme in Thoreau College and also in these podcast interviews that we've been doing, that often, challenge the edge of your comfort zone, pushing those limits is an important part of the educational process, especially in this kind of transformative zone that we're in. Often, traditional education will push people's intellect, right? Do harder math problems, read harder books, speak in public, things like that. But also, we've explored the idea of expeditionary learning, something that you've also been engaged in, taking people on camping trips and out into the wilderness and things like that. But also, it seems like you're pushing challenge in a few different directions, right? There's the cultural immersions that you're talking about, but also just the physical closeness of people on the bus, right?
Yeah, talk about that as a comfort zone, how, and a lot of these students, do remark on that. Like, how could I be crazy enough to sign up for a trip where I have to be, shoulder to shoulder with these people I don't even know, living and sleeping and eating on this bus for a whole week. So yeah, definitely, and it's almost like either you're part of this community or you're not. And so, people cross over and realize, hey, it's fun to cook together, and it's fun to sit down and eat together and enjoy this food, and to invite, other people in and to be part of our our meal community, and so there, I think for many of them, it's maybe their first experience of really that sense of travel and how travel can, do a lot of things. It can help you meet new people, help you learn about a new area, and as Mark Twain would say, travel is the biggest enemy of bigotry and racism and whatnot, because obviously you have to go into a place maybe where it's not familiar to you and maybe you're not comfortable, but you begin to meet people and hear their stories and build the trust and understand different viewpoints, different places that people come from.
The Driftless Folk School, located in the beautiful rolling hills and valleys of southwest Wisconsin, is a community of lifelong learners dedicated to cultivating personal and cultural resilience through hands-on educational experiences. The Driftless Folk School offers classes in agriculture, land stewardship, natural history, folk arts and crafts, herbalism, wilderness skills, and more. For further information on the Driftless Folk School, visit us at driftlessfolkschool.org on the World Wide Web.
You've been an educator, Steve, for several decades now. I'm wondering if you have any observations about how youth culture, young people have changed over time. Is there differences in what young people are interested in, what's challenging or easy for them that you've seen?
Yeah, I think as experiential education has become more of a term in mainstream education, the idea of, well, maybe there is something more than just reading books and passing exams. I think that's much more mainstream now than it was when I was starting out in secondary education, and certainly high school. There really wasn't any real theme or emphasis on that at all.
So the students you're working with are in general self-selected, right? They're choosing to do this as opposed to going to Cancun or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a sampling bias in there maybe. But I was reading recently an article by a Waldorf high school teacher in which she described, after decades of teaching, a difference that he was seeing, which was, when he started teaching, the typical kind of trouble you might have, or the challenge you would have with a teenager, high school student, would be they would say, I won't do that. Whereas today, students are much more likely to say, I can't. I wonder if that's something that resonates with you. Have you seen that?
Yeah, and I don't know that I see it, because as you say, these students that join the Mary Green Marvel are kind of understanding that they're stepping out of their comfort zone and they're taking an adventure, and they are choosing that. And I don't know that I've tapped into this as much as I want, but I really, really strive to find those students that are reluctant, and maybe there's forces in their life that really keep them from stepping out of this bubble, if you will. But yeah, I think that's a dynamic place where I'm certainly feeling the calling to try to reach out to those groups. And as I build up this adventure service learning bus and really educational initiative, I feel like that's really where the work is for me, is to find these partnerships with maybe other youth organizations and work with those youth organizations to help students get out of their bubbles, get out of their their insular lives, and to find that learning is much more broader than maybe they think.
Mm-hmm. So yes, I wonder if you could talk about your other project here, Sittin Pretty Farm, which is, as I mentioned, was a place we had some interaction with this summer. A beautiful spot. Can you say what's this all about?
The nonprofit that I started that includes the Mary Green Marvel, had this mission of adventure and service learning that we referred to, and then it became an interest that what else can we do, to do community outreach within the Viroqua, Vernon County region here, and so a certain pandemic came along and kind of shut down the Mary Green Marvel for a good 2 years, and so I pondered what can I do, in this transition time. And so that became kind of the opportunity to build up Sittin Pretty Farm. And the idea was to, create these cabins that would be on Airbnb, and that would be a funding stream where 100% of those Airbnb funds would go into helping, our Mary Green Marvel trips, and to try to find students that couldn't afford to do those trips, and to provide financial aid for those trips as well as our summer camps. So we started building. We brought in one tiny house, and then we found a mobile home frame and built up another tiny house on that. And then with the help of the Amish neighbors, we built up a house. And then we decided we wanted to build some kind of a community center, and it made sense to have a community kitchen that go with it. And the idea was to make a space where the kitchen would be big enough to be a commercial kitchen, where community could come in and use it for like fundraisers, use it to process food, to add value to producers' work, and to have kind of a community gathering place. So with the help again of my Amish, I call them my Amish homies, my neighbors.
Yeah, just for those who haven't been there, this is really right in the heart of Amish country. Next door is Amish schoolhouse and a couple of farms, and this is right up and close to the Amish folk.
Yeah, so they've been a big help in helping me build these buildings, and initially the kitchen was going to be small, but again we had time and the resources were coming in with the Airbnb funding to build a bigger building. And so we ended up having what we call the party barn. So it includes the commercial community kitchen, and then a loft up above where people can set up tables and do a staff retreat, big windows out to the western horizon to watch the sun go down, the rolling hill country of the Driftless. I like to say I can see all the way back home, which is across the ridges over to Iowa. And it's and then the question again. This has all been very kind of organic in how it's evolved. But the question was, how can we do community outreach? How can we, give back to the community? And so, this community again, and just kind of amazes me in all that's going on and all the ways that there can be these collaborations. So I found, a host of other nonprofits in the area and proposed the idea that why don't we create goodwill and financial help for each other by doing these wood-fired pizza nights with live music. And so I reached out to a variety of nonprofits, Driftless Folk School and Thoreau College among them, and proposed the idea that if you can send some of your volunteers from your organization and spread the word through your network, let's do wood-fired pizza on Friday nights and have live music and give people a chance to gather again after this pandemic, and bring the community together and, enjoy the magic of summer evenings on a ridgetop. So that's kind of how it came to be, and here we are, toward the end of summer, and I can't say how heartwarming it's been to, create these bridges out into the community and find the goodwill of so many good people, and to have this kind of mutual fundraising aspect, but more, I think it's the wealth of goodwill and good food and the merriment of music, and again, really feeling so blessed to have so many local musicians who, again, just picking up the phone and reaching out to them. It was really pretty easy to put together a schedule of nonprofits and local musicians to make these Friday nights be fun events.
Yeah, absolutely. It was for those of us who never have had the good fortune to go on a Mary Green Marvel trip or one of your canoe trips or been in one of your classes somewhere else. It did feel like we got a little taste of the curation that you do so well. Of interesting people and high quality culture and music and excellent food and there's an atmosphere where something magic happens. There where community happens and where some transformation in meeting of people.
Yeah,
Every
exactly. And, I don't know that there's a set recipe for that. But again, I just feel pretty overwhelmed and blessed to be in this community where that can happen so easily.
Well, so I'm wondering, back to the Mary Green Marvel experiences, and maybe this is connected with Sittin Pretty as well. I know from people who have done our programs at Thoreau College, people who have deep experiences with, adventure, expeditionary learning programs like Knowles and Outward Bound, a certain proportion of those people will say, "Gosh, I want to do more of that," right? Mm. Or like that has changed my life to the degree that I want to, that I want to make this my profession, or just to do it for a longer period of time. And I'm wondering if you encounter students like this, coming out of your trips, and if so, what do you advise them, or where do you send them?
Yeah, when we wrap up our closing circle, like for our New Orleans service weeks, I often sit under one of those big live oak trees. Some people don't know how old they are. They say they could be over 1,000 years old. And so it's just a perfect place to kind of feel, what comes next, and to be rooted in this continuum of, service really, and service learning, and to know that there's been this giving and these people that have opened their hearts, to the learning that goes with getting out and taking up the adventure and growing ourselves through giving back. And I often put up a chart that says, here's all these things you can go out and do, and it varies from, Peace Corps to AmeriCorps to Food Corps to, all the organizations really worldwide, nationwide, as well as in their own backyard, that they can stay engaged and to understand kind of the magic that goes with that ability to say, it is my problem, instead of saying, oh, it's someone else's problem, it's not my problem. When we can say that, these struggles, these injustices, these community needs that are all around us, no matter where we live, are part of our experience and part of, our own quest for freedom. That just sparks that automatic engagement where, yes, I am interested, and yes, I care, and yes, this is a problem. And then I think part of the magic of that is that it's not such a oppressive thing and a heavy thing, and there's all these problems of the world, and there's so much greed and ignorance, and all these people are so divided, and it's such a struggle, that the struggle seems a little lighter when you can form your group and find your people, and engage in that service, engage in that problem solving, engage in that community activism together, and finding ways to meet all sorts of people in doing so, and how that brings the community together.
Yeah, I think that's, you give a picture there of action, of something to do, because I would say my observation as an educator over a number of years is that I do see more hopelessness and despair in young people, and people in general, of course, mm-hmm. but especially sensible in people who are 18, 19, 20 years old, who are looking out at the environmental situation, at the political situation, at just the cultural situation, and feeling hopelessness. Right?
Yes.
And yeah, I think is that something that you've seen in students come along?
Yeah, and I think I'm a big believer that the medicine really is in finding a way to care, and finding that your caring does matter, and that how your caring can connect into a community, and you meet the people that want to care with you. That's really how we realize it's not something we have to do by ourselves, but we find that kind of the joy of crew, I call it, the joy of crew, the joy of serving
That's a Mardi Gras
together.
word, yeah?
Yes, yes. Yeah, a lot of that comes from just hearing the stories and understanding that culture of New Orleans. I mean, they've been fighting the odds for a long time, whether it's, the social injustices, the inequalities, or just the environmental plight down there, flooding and all the things they're up against.
Yeah, it's not just not just sweat and hard work. It's also celebration and good food and music as well.
Yeah, we can't lose touch. That this service isn't meant to be drudgery.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me too that we got the bus rolling again with our summer camps, and we took a group of high school age students up to Lake Superior, and we had a variety of experiences up there, from canoeing the whitewater on the Brule to sea kayaking on Lake Superior into the sea caves, doing service work for a Finnish heritage center, doing an art class with a local artist. And the last night we were there, we met up with a native elder, Marvin Defoe, from the Red Cliff Band of Ojibwe. And he sat with us. He joined us for our supper, and we sat on the shoreline there at Lake Superior, and it was a magical sunset. The colors were hard to describe, and a rainbow came, and he conveyed to us that we're going through these changes, and he said specifically this climate change that we're dealing with. And he said even his dad and the generation before started seeing it in the woods and was concerned, what his son Marvin, who's now well into his 60s, would be facing. And Marvin really just called us to our hearts, and to know that the answers to our questions and the answers to our struggles really lie within our own hearts, and the love that we have to be kind and to be decent, and to continue on with the faith that love wins. And as if on cue, that sunset just kept getting more beautiful. And it was kind of like the rainbow was a promise to us in the sky, to heed this message that's been passed on for people struggling for generations and generations, to have faith in the love that you have to give.
Thoreau College is a leader in an emergent movement dedicated to the renewal and revitalization of higher education through the creation of new, humanly scaled institutions with holistic curricula known as microcolleges. Thoreau College, higher education for the whole human being.
Yeah, that story also, underlines, I think, something that you do, through your trips, and something you do in your own person, which is connect young people with elders, right? With people who can carry that long view. And in the case of, the Ojibwe have this powerful narrative over many generations, the Seven Fires prophecy, that I think is important, people should know about. But I think I just this summer, the Thoreau volunteers who worked with you, and I know your Waldorf school students, I mean, really view you as a touchstone, as a real, as a model of service and life of service. And we've heard that throughout these interviews on the podcast also, when people reflect back to their early adulthood, 18, 19, 20 years old, what comes up very frequently is that one person or two, like teachers, maybe it's a class teacher, professor, maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a person in their community, but that individual they had some connection with. And you clearly have been that for a number of people. And I'm wondering if how, if we're observing that as a pattern, thinking about creating programs like Thoreau College, what can we learn from that? How do we create scenarios for those type of relationships to flourish between students and mentor, teacher, elder figures?
Yeah, again, I think it's a very organic thing for each individual, and as a collective, how that comes together and how there's that interface with whatever community you're in. And those people are always there. Those teachers are waiting to be asked. So many people are waiting to be asked, "What's your story? Tell me about your life." One of the things that we did when I was teaching at Pleasant Ridge was every Friday we'd go down to the assisted living, the elder care here in town, and we developed these relationships with the elders there over a school year. And, the students got to know these people, and there was a relationship there that developed that was one of trust over time for the elders to tell their stories, that they felt, I think, that they were on a ground where the students really did care, and that they showed up every week to show them that they cared. And in that caring, there was that story to be told and to be cherished. And that's just those relationships, I think, are what come of the learning by just showing up.
Yeah. That's it's, again, creating the space and the time for it.
Yes.
Many systems in our society involve the checking off of checklists, of moving things very quickly, putting things in boxes, but you need to create the space for those conversations, would be my observation.
Yes.
Organically, right, as you say, like you can't quite say where it's going to go, but
right.
There's a little bit of trust in that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, in my work with the Native community too, when I taught in Michigan on the reservation, that understandably so, the Native people were very wary of a white teacher coming onto the reservation.
Were your students there?
They ranged. It was a kind of a community education center, so they ranged from doing summer school with kids to doing adult learning. Of schools of adults coming back to try to finish their high school diploma. But that was very much an example of really having to work on trust and showing that I was there for more than just to check in at 8 o'clock and check out at 4 o'clock. It was when they saw that I cared enough to come and visit and be a part of their community, that trust slowly but surely built. And for me, maybe I gave something in my teaching there, but I gained so much, which is that old adage, when you give, you receive in multiple ways. Then one of the Native elders took me under his wing and kind of taught me the ways of fasting and doing what sometimes is called the vision quest. So that 4 days out in the woods continues again, like the 30-day silent retreat that I had as a Jesuit, to be a real reference point. And it's something that I feel, was intimidating to do it, scary. But once I had done it and had that trust of myself, fasting in the woods, it became a beautiful spiritual kind of tradition for me, and that I continue to return to. And when I was teaching at Pleasant Ridge, I always did it before I started teaching, because I felt like I needed it to ground and center myself, and to have that kind of fortress inside of myself, spiritual fortress, to have the resources to deal with the children in the most graceful way I could come up with.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that's something that people, that I recognize, and I think people, students recognize in you, and I think in great teachers in general, is that there's a connection between vocation, a spiritual calling, and that work, right? That work of developing that inner space to be who you need to be to do that calling.
Right. Yeah. I think good teachers have charm and charisma, but if it's not grounded in something, of spiritual practice, something of, where they understand kind of the self-surrender that goes with being filled up with something beyond themselves to really be an inspired teacher.
Yeah. And it's not just teaching too, right? That's, I think, great farmers, great craftspeople, great healers, right, are really working out of the same space.
Yeah,
that's
I think it's the humility to be open to being filled with, whatever spiritual force you might be subscribing to.
Beautiful. Steve, I think that's a great place to leave it. So thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Great to be here, and good luck with your work at Thoreau College and the Driftless Folk School.